Breathe in a deep, slow breath. The air you draw in is not clean. It carries the scent of damp stone, of wood smoke clinging to everything like a second skin, and the faint, metallic tang of old blood that never quite washes away. Before you, in the flickering torchlight, sits a man who is less a man and more a symbol, an anchor for an entire kingdom. He is the sovereign, the king, his face illuminated by the unsteady flame, casting shadows that dance like nervous specters in the hollows of his cheeks. His fingers, adorned with rings heavy enough to be weapons, trace the edge of a royal decree. With a dip of his quill and a scratch of ink on parchment, he can end a family line, start a war, or raise a cathedral to the heavens. His power feels absolute, a force of nature as undeniable as a thunderstorm. You watch as he nods, a simple, almost lazy gesture, and a man's life is forfeited, his fate sealed more securely than a letter with a wax seal. But now, look closer. Watch as his eyes, which just a moment ago held the cold certainty of a god, dart towards the dark corners of the chamber. There is a line, invisible to you, that he will not cross. It is not a law written by his ancestors, or a treaty signed with a rival. It is a thread of pure, primal fear. He can command 1,000 swords, but he will not, under any circumstance, allow the royal cutlery to be placed in a certain configuration. He can have a man flayed alive in the public square, but he shivers at the thought of spilling salt and not immediately throwing a pinch over his left shoulder. These are the true laws, the ones etched not in stone, but in the marrow of his bones, whispers from a time before crowns and thrones, when fear was the only king. We are going to walk these shadowy lines together, you and I, to see the tripwires that can unmake the most powerful of men. The morning breaks, not with a brilliant sunrise, but with a slow, reluctant leaking of gray light into the world. You are standing in a narrow, cobbled street, the stones slick with a mixture of morning dew and yesterday's filth. The fog is so thick you can almost chew it, and it muffles the world in a blanket of damp silence. The air is cold enough to make your teeth ache, and the smell is a complex symphony of rot, wet straw, human waste from the gutters, the sour breath of a nearby tannery, and underneath it all, the earthy promise of baking bread from a baker already hours into his work. This is the city waking up, not with a jolt, but with a weary groan. A door creaks open, and a woman empties a chamber pot into the street with a casual flick of her wrist, a morning ritual as common as prayer. You see the unspoken rules already at play. No one builds their door facing the old gallows hill, and everyone knows to walk a wide circle around the beggar who lost his shadow. As the sun, a pale, watery disk, climbs higher, you find yourself in the chaotic heart of the city, the market square. This is the kingdom's noisy, beating pulse, a riot of color, sound, and smell. The air is thick with the shouts of vendors hawking their wares, each trying to outvolume the other in a competition as fierce as any battlefield. Fresh eels, straight from the river, one screams, while another promises miracle tonics that can cure everything from a toothache to a broken heart, a sort of medieval multi-level marketing scheme. You feel the press of the crowd, the texture of rough-spun wool and greasy leather brushing against you. The ground is a treacherous landscape of mud, discarded vegetable leaves, and chicken droppings. The smells are overwhelming. The sweet perfume of strawberries piled high next to the gut-wrenching stench of a butcher's stall, where pig heads stare blankly at the sky, their expressions surprisingly philosophical. Here, the taboos are a currency. A merchant will give you a better price if you were born on a full moon, but will refuse to sell to you at all if you are the seventh son of a seventh son, for that is a power too unpredictable to invite into a simple transaction. Now the afternoon sky begins to bruise with the threat of rain. You drift away from the market's frenzy and into the relative quiet of a tavern. The light inside is dim, golden, and thick, with smoke from the great hearth and a dozen clay pipes. The air tastes of spilled ale, sweat, and wet wool. The sound is a low, conspiratorial murmur, the gentle clinking of wooden tankards, and the crackle of the fire. This is where the unwritten laws are debated, reinforced, and spread like gossip. You overhear a group of men arguing in hushed, serious tones about the proper way to bury a cat to ensure good luck for the household. They speak of it with the same gravity they would a royal edict. A young woman is silently ostracized in a corner, not for a crime, but because she was seen weaving on a holy day, a transgression against the unseen world that is far more serious than simple theft. Here, a king's decree is just words on paper. The story of a man who saw his own ghostly double on the road is a truth that can change a whole village's travel plans for a month. The rain begins to fall, a steady, percussive drumming on the tavern's thatched roof. You leave the smoky warmth and find yourself before a modest home. Inside, a family gathers as twilight bleeds into the sky. The room is small, dominated by a single hearth that provides both heat and light. The meager meal of stew and hard bread is eaten in near silence, but the air is thick with ritual. Before eating, the father dips a finger in his cup and flicks a drop of water into the fire, a tiny offering to whatever spirits might dwell in the flames. The mother carefully avoids letting her shadow fall across the sleeping baby in the cradle, for a shadow can carry away a soul. These are not acts of devotion to a distant god in a cold cathedral. They are practical, desperate negotiations with the immediate, terrifying world of spirits and omens. They are the fine print on the contract of existence, the clauses that state you must not bring hawthorn blossoms into the house or mention the name of the Fae after dark. If this quiet exploration of ancient fears resonates with you, feel free to leave a like, but only if you truly feel it. Night has fallen completely. The city is transformed. The familiar streets are now alien canyons of shadow and threat. The only light comes from a sliver of moon and the occasional torch sputtering outside a wealthy home. Every gust of wind sounds like a whisper. Every shadow seems to move with a life of its own. This is the hour when the other laws, the darkest ones, hold sway. The laws of the dead. You feel the collective shudder of the city behind its bolted doors. No one dares whistle in the dark, for it summons things you do not want to meet. A corpse must be carried out of a house feet first, so its spirit cannot look back and call another family member to follow it into death. And blood is the most potent of all. A single drop spilled in the wrong place, at the wrong time, can taint a place forever, an indelible stain on the fabric of the world. And now we return to the king. He is alone in his chambers, the fire burned down to glowing embers. The immense power he wielded this morning seems a distant memory. Now he is just a man in a dark room, surrounded by the ghosts of his own superstitions. He carefully checks the alignment of his bed. It must never face north, the direction of the dead. He will not sleep without a piece of iron tucked under his pillow to ward off nightmares and malicious spirits. He who can order an army to march is terrified of a creak in the floorboards. He who owns all the land you can see feels like a trespasser in the darkness of his own room. The crown on his head is a symbol of his mastery over the world of men, but in the quiet of the night, it feels like a heavy, cold cage, trapping him in a world governed by fears he cannot conquer, a world where the whisper of a taboo is louder than the command of a king. Perhaps you can comment with the exact time you finally drifted off, letting these ancient fears become the landscape of your dreams. The world does not wait for the king's fears to subside. Long before the first hint of dawn touches the royal spire, another world is already in motion, a world of muscle, sweat, and bone-deep weariness. Let us descend, far from the cold stone of the castle, and deep into the earth itself. Here, in the suffocating blackness of a coal mine, there is no day or night. There is only the tunnel, the seam, and the rhythmic percussive sound of iron striking rock. You are there, feeling the damp, chilling cold that seeps through your ragged clothes and into your very marrow. The air is a thick, gritty soup of coal dust and stagnant water, a taste you swallow with every breath, a flavor that will coat your lungs for the rest of your short life. The only light is the feeble, sputtering flame of a tallow lamp fixed to your cap, casting a pathetic little circle of light that seems to be swallowed by the immense pressing darkness all around you. Your world has shrunk to the space of your own body and the rock face in front of you. You lift the heavy pickaxe, your shoulders screaming in protest, a chorus of aching muscles that has been singing the same tune for years. The axe rises, a dark shape against the faint light, and then falls. The impact jars your entire frame, from your cracked hands to your worn-out boots. A spray of sharp rock chips peppers your face. The sound, a sharp clink, is immediately deadened by the close, damp walls, as if the earth itself is absorbing all energy, all life. You swing again and again. It is a pendulum of misery. The lift, the strain, the fall, the jolt. This is your entire existence, measured not in hours, but in the slow, agonizing retreat of the coal seam. You are not a man. You are a human chisel, slowly chipping away at a mountain for a handful of coins that will barely buy you bread. Beside you, an old man named Thomas coughs. It is not a normal cough. It is a deep, wet, rattling sound, as if his lungs are tearing themselves apart. He spits, and in the lamplight, you see the phlegm is black, thick with the very substance you are digging from the earth. He has been breathing this mine for 40 years, and now the mine is breathing him back out. No one says a word. This is the future. This is the pension plan. The real law here is not about theft or murder. It is about the knockers, the spirits of the mine you must never mock. It's the rule that you never whistle underground, lest you mimic the sound of gas escaping, or worse. Summon the spirits of those who died in a collapse. A canary in a cage is your only true oracle, its frantic fluttering a more potent prophecy than any royal astrologer could ever conjure. Its silence is a death sentence. You pause for a moment, leaning your forehead against the cold, wet rock. Your back is a roadmap of pain. You pull a small, greasy cloth from your pocket. Inside is a piece of hard, stale bread and a sliver of onion. This is your banquet. You chew slowly, the grit of coal between your teeth mixing with the food, a constant reminder of where you are. The water from your flask tastes of tin and earth. There is no conversation, only the sound of chewing and the distant rhythmic clink, clink, clink of other men, other pendulums of misery, swinging in the darkness. You are all ghosts, haunting the deep places of the world, your lives a slow-motion burial. The only hope is the distant, almost unimaginable dream of the surface, of seeing the sky, even if it is the same flat, gray sky as yesterday. The foreman's shout echoes down the tunnel, a harsh, guttural sound that means your brief respite is over. You wrap the remaining piece of bread, a treasure to be saved, and push yourself off the wall. The pickaxe feels impossibly heavy now, an anchor pulling you down. You swing. The jolt is familiar. You swing again. The pain is a constant companion. You are carving out the fuel for the kingdom's fires, for the baker's oven and the king's hearth. But your own fire is slowly, inexorably being extinguished. The true fear is not the sudden violent death of a cave-in, but this slow, grinding erasure of your own life, one swing at a time, until there is nothing left but a black-dusted memory and a rattling cough that echoes in the dark. Now let us rise from the suffocating earth and into the air of a different kind of prison. You are in a long, cavernous room, the air so thick with cotton fibers it looks like a permanent indoor fog. You can feel the lint on your skin, in your nostrils, at the back of your throat. It is a soft, gentle suffocation. The noise, however, is anything but gentle. It is a deafening, relentless, clattering roar, the sound of 100 weaving looms working in furious, mechanical unison. It is a sound that gets inside your head and stays there. A mechanical orchestra playing a symphony of industrial misery. You have to shout to be heard by the person standing next to you, but after a while, everyone stops trying. You communicate in nods, grimaces, and sharp gestures, a silent language developed in the heart of the noise. You are watching Alara, a girl no older than 15, her face pale and smudged with grease. Her fingers, small and impossibly nimble, fly across the threads of her loom. They are a blur of motion, a dance she has perfected through endless repetition. A thread snaps. Her hand darts out, faster than you can follow, finds the two broken ends, and with a twist and a knot that is more instinct than thought, the thread is whole again. The shuttle continues its frantic journey back and forth, never missing a beat. She does this 100 times a day. 1,000 times. Her focus is absolute, because a moment's inattention means a flaw in the cloth, a flaw that will be docked from her meager wages. Or worse, a moment's inattention could mean her hair or her sleeve. or her fingers are caught and pulled into the machine's unforgiving embrace. The overseer walks the aisles, a stout man with a cane he uses to point, to tap, and sometimes to strike. He is the high priest of this temple of noise. His power is absolute. He doesn't need a royal decree. A single dissatisfied grunt from him can mean a girl loses her position, plunging her family into ruin. The girls work under his gaze, their backs bent, their eyes fixed on the ever-growing bolt of fabric. The unwritten law here is not to look him in the eye. It is to become part of the machine, to be as tireless and uncomplaining as the gears and levers. The only taboo is to stop. Sickness is a weakness. Exhaustion is a sin. Your body is not your own. It is a component, a soft part of the great, clattering machine. A bell rings, a sound that barely cuts through the din. It is the midday break. The machines shudder to a halt, and the sudden, ringing silence is more jarring than the noise was. It is a physical pressure in your ears. The girls slump where they stand. Alara pulls a small, cloth-wrapped parcel from a pocket in her apron. It is a single, cold, boiled potato. She eats it slowly, mechanically, her eyes still staring at the silent loom, its threads waiting like a spider's web. Her hands, you notice, are shaking slightly, a fine tremor from the constant vibration and tension. She doesn't talk to the other girls. The brief pause is not for camaraderie. It is for the silent, individual gathering of strength to endure the second half of the day. The bell rings again, ending the silence. The looms roar back to life, one by one, and Ilara is once again part of the machine. The shuttle flies. The threads blur. Her fingers dance their frantic, repetitive ballet. She is weaving cloth for fine ladies in the city, for merchants, coats, perhaps even for the king's banners. But her own dress is patched and faded. She is creating beauty she will never touch, wealth she will never share. The only thing she is truly weaving is her own life into a pattern of endless, deafening, soul-crushing labor. The taboo she fears most is the day her fingers slow down, the day her eyes can no longer follow the frantic shuttle, the day the machine decides she is a broken part, ready to be discarded. Let us leave the roar of the looms and follow the scent of baking bread, a smell that promises warmth and sustenance, a promise that is, like most promises, a carefully constructed lie. You are in the pre-dawn darkness, in the sweltering, confined space of a bakery. The air is thick and heavy, a cocktail of flour dust, yeast, and the almost unbearable heat radiating from a massive brick oven that glows like the mouth of a dormant volcano. The heat is a physical presence, pressing on your skin, stealing the moisture from your lungs. The floor is coated in a fine, slippery layer of flour, and the air shimmers above the oven's iron door. Here the day starts when the rest of the city is lost in its deepest sleep. Before you stands the baker, a man whose arms are as thick as tree limbs from a lifetime of kneading dough. He is pale, not from sickness, but from a permanent dusting of flour that has settled into every line on his face, giving him the appearance of a living statue. He moves with a slow, rhythmic economy of motion. He plunges his arms up to the elbows into a massive wooden trough filled with a mountain of dough. He grunts with the effort, folding, pushing, and turning the sticky living mass. It is an intimate struggle, a battle of man versus gluten. His sweat drips from his brow and disappears into the dough, a salty, secret ingredient in every loaf. This is a dance he has performed every night for 30 years, a liturgy of flour, water, and fire. He works in near silence, the only sounds, the soft thump-thump of the dough being worked, the scraping of the wooden peel on the stone floor, and the hungry crackle of the fire within the oven. His son, a boy of 10, scurries about, feeding logs into the firebox, his face flushed with the heat. The boy coughs, a dry, dusty sound. It is the baker's cough, a malady known as baker's lung, where the fine flour dust slowly turns the soft tissue of the lungs into something resembling hardtack. The baker hears it, and a shadow passes over his face, but he says nothing. There is nothing to be said. This is the boy's inheritance: the heat, the flour, the cough, the endless nights. The baker's superstitions are as vital as his yeast. He carves a cross into the top of each loaf before it enters the oven, not just for tradition, but as a genuine ward to keep the devil from making the bread flat. Spilling salt on the floor is a catastrophe that must be immediately remedied with a thrown pinch over the shoulder, a gesture of panicked appeasement to the unseen forces that could ruin a whole night's work. A batch of bread that fails to rise is not a chemical failure. It is a curse, a dark omen that can send a cloud of gloom over the household for days. These are the laws that matter, the invisible threads that hold his precarious world together. The king's tax is an annoyance. A sour starter is a genuine disaster. As the first loaves come out of the oven, their crusts a perfect crackling brown, the baker allows himself a small, weary smile. He has won the battle for another night. He and his son sit on flour sacks, breaking off a piece of the hot bread. It is their only meal, eaten quickly before the city wakes and the customers arrive. The bread is delicious, a testament to his skill and sweat, but for him, it tastes only of exhaustion. He is the creator of the city's daily bread, the very symbol of life and community, but he is a slave to his own creation, bound to the heat of his oven and the endless, nightly cycle of turning dust into life. His fear is not of a bad harvest, but of the morning his arms are too weak to lift the dough, the morning the fire in the oven is stronger than the fire in his own weary body. Now let us move to the edge of the city, where the land gives way to the gray, choppy water of the estuary. The wind here is a constant, biting presence, carrying the sharp, salty smell of the sea, the stench of fish guts, and the damp, earthy odor of wet nets. You are on a small, battered fishing boat, the wood slick and worn smooth by countless waves and hands. The boat pitches and rolls on the restless water, a motion that feels like a deliberate attempt by the sea to unseat you. The sky overhead is a vast, indifferent expanse of gray, the same color as the water, making it impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. This is a world of two colors and 1,000 dangers. A man named Finn stands at the tiller, his face a leathery mask carved by sun and sea spray. His eyes are narrowed to slits, constantly reading the subtle language of the water's surface, a language more complex and vital than any book. His hands, calloused and scarred, hold the tiller with a practiced ease, but his knuckles are white with tension. Every fisherman knows that the sea is not just water. It is a living, breathing entity with a temper as unpredictable as a mad king. It gives, and it takes, and it does not care which. Finn speaks to the boat, to the waves, to the wind, murmuring words of encouragement and respect, a constant negotiation with the elements. His young son, barely a man, is hauling in a net, his body straining with the effort. The net is heavy, filled with a writhing silver mass of fish, but also with rocks, seaweed, and the occasional piece of debris. The boy's hands are raw and red from the coarse rope and the cold water. He works without complaint, his movements a mirror of his father's, a dance passed down through generations. The fish flap and gasp on the deck, their iridescent scales the only flash of color in this gray world. Their silent, frantic struggle for life is a stark, daily reminder of the stakes of this profession. Here, you don't just work for a living. You wrest it, dripping and struggling from a cold and unwilling source. The superstitions here are as thick as the morning fog. Finn would rather face a storm than allow a woman to set foot on his boat before a voyage. He would never start a journey on a Friday, a day belonging to an older, more sinister calendar of luck. The word pig is never spoken at sea. It is a cursed name that can summon a storm. He has a faded tattoo of a coiled serpent on his forearm, an inked prayer to ward off the true monsters of the deep, the ones that lurk not just in the water, but in the darker depths of a sailor's imagination. These are not quaint customs. They are the rigid, unwritten laws of survival in a world where a man's life can be extinguished by a single rogue wave or a moment of bad luck. As they turn the boat back towards the shore, the small catch piled in baskets, a cold rain begins to fall. They eat their meal on the water, hard biscuits and dried fish, chewed while their hands are still covered in fish scales and brine. There is no comfort here, no warmth. There is only the endless rolling motion of the boat, and the knowledge that they will do this again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day, until the sea claims them or their bodies give out. Finn looks at his son, seeing his own youth reflected in the boy's tired face, and feels a pang of something that is both pride and despair. He has given his son the only thing he has, a life of toil, a legacy of fear, and a deep, abiding, and utterly terrifying respect for the gray, hungry water. From the wide-open danger of the sea, we now turn to the tight, suffocating confines of the city's chimneys. Look up, past the jumbled rooftops, and you will see a small, dark figure silhouetted against the pale sky. It is a boy, no older than 7, a human brush sent to clean the arteries of the city's hearths. You are with him, as he is pushed into the base of a chimney. The opening is terrifyingly small. The darkness inside is absolute, a solid, pressing black that smells of old soot, creosote, and fear. The air is thick with fine, acrid dust that immediately clogs your nose and throat, making you gasp and cough, but there is no fresh air to be had. His master, a gruff man with soot-stained hands, gives him a final shove. "Get on with it, Pip," he grunts, his voice a distant rumble from the world of light. The boy, Pip, begins to climb. His small, bare feet and raw knees search for purchase on the rough brickwork. The space is so tight he has to angle his shoulders and hips to move, inching his way upward like a worm. Soot rains down on him, getting in his eyes, his mouth, his hair. It coats his skin, a second black layer that will never truly wash off. He is not climbing. He is burrowing his way up through a vertical tunnel of filth. His only tools are a small scraper and the calloused skin of his own small body. The journey upwards is an eternity of darkness and scraping. The sound of his own ragged breathing is loud in the enclosed space. He can feel the bricks, slick with tarry buildup, against his cheek. His only thought is of the patch of sky at the top, a distant, pale square that seems to get no closer. This is a fear far more immediate than any ghost or goblin. It is the fear of being stuck, of being wedged in the dark, unable to move up or down, his cries for help swallowed by the tons of brick around him. It is a death that has claimed other boys, a story whispered among the sweeps, a cautionary tale that is all too real. Finally, he reaches the top. He emerges into the light and the wind, gasping for air, his small body black from head to toe. For a moment, he is the king of the city, looking down on the world of men from his precarious, windy perch. He can see the river, the market, the distant walls of the king's castle. It is a dizzying, terrifying, and beautiful sight. This single moment of freedom, of air, is the only payment that matters. But it is fleeting. The master's shout from below calls him back to the darkness. The journey down is faster, a controlled slide through the filth, scraping and cleaning as he goes. When he tumbles out of the fireplace into the grand room of a wealthy merchant, he is a creature from another world, a soot-caked goblin blinking in the light. The lady of the house shrieks and covers her nose with a perfumed handkerchief. To her, he is not a child. He is a necessary, disgusting tool. His master collects the payment, a few coins, and gives Pip a stale crust of bread. The boy gnaws on it, his teeth leaving white marks in the black grime around his mouth. He is considered good luck, a strange paradox of his profession. To see a chimney sweep is to have a fortunate day. But his own luck is a short, brutal, and suffocating thing. A life spent in darkness so that others might enjoy the warmth of their fire. And now let us join the slow, steady pulse of the city's commerce, the lifeblood that moves through its clogged arteries. You are walking alongside a heavy cart, its massive wooden wheels groaning under the weight of barrels of ale. The cart is pulled by a single immense horse, a creature of patient muscle, its breath misting in the cool air. The street is not a street in the modern sense. It is a river of mud, animal dung, and garbage, churned into a thick, foul-smelling soup by the constant traffic. The wheels sink deep into the muck, and every foot forward is a struggle, a victory of brute force over inertia. The carter, a man named Gruff, walks beside the horse. He doesn't hold the reins. He guides the animal with his voice, a series of low grunts, clicks, and curses that form a private language between man and beast. His face is a mask of grim determination. His world is a constant calculation of angles, ruts, and the shifting patience of his horse. He smells of sweat, horse, and the sour ale that is inevitably sloshed from one of the barrels. His job is not just to move goods. It is to navigate a landscape of pure chaos, a world of shouting merchants, stray dogs, and children who dart out from every alley. The sound is a constant, low-level roar, the creak and groan of the cart's axle, the rhythmic clop of the horse's hooves in the mud, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and Gruff's own steady stream of curses directed at the world in general. He is a fixture of the city, as much a part of the landscape as the leaning buildings and the overflowing gutters. He moves at the speed of the horse, a slow, deliberate pace that is the true rhythm of this world. There is no hurry, because hurrying is impossible. There is only the slow, relentless journey from the brewery to the tavern, a journey he makes 3 times a day. He and the horse, Bess, understand each other perfectly. When Bess stops, refusing to go forward, Gruff does not whip her. He gets down and checks the ground. The carter's law says that a horse knows things a man does not. It can sense a sinkhole before the wheel finds it, or it can feel the presence of something unseen. They say a horse will not cross a spot where a murder was committed, and every carter has a story of a stubborn animal that saved him from a haunted corner or a cursed crossroads. These are not fables. They are the operating manual for a carter's life, a set of rules far more important than any toll or tariff. They finally arrive at the tavern. The barrels are unloaded with a series of thuds and grunts, and Gruff is paid. He takes a moment to run a hand along Bess's flank, murmuring to her, sharing a piece of a dry apple he has saved in his pocket. This quiet moment of connection is his only reward. His body aches from the constant strain of wrestling the cart through the mud, and his mind is dull from the sheer monotony of the route. He will turn the empty cart around and begin the journey back, the groaning of the wheels now a higher, emptier sound. He is a human gear in the great, slow machine of the city, his life a repeating loop, a deep rut carved into the muddy streets, a journey that always and forever leads back to where it began. Let us leave the slow, muddy rhythm of the carter's life and turn our gaze upward, toward the heavens. Not in prayer, but toward the skeletal framework of a new cathedral spire, a man-made mountain of wood and stone clawing its way into the gray sky. Here, the danger is not hidden in a drop of water or a mouthful of bread. It is open, honest, and omnipresent. You are standing on a scaffolding plank, hundreds of feet in the air. The wood is unseasoned, slick with a morning frost, and it sways with every gust of wind that funnels through the city's narrow streets. Below you, the world is a tapestry of toy houses and scurrying insects that are actually people. The only sound is the whistle of the wind in your ears and the distant, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a mason's hammer. There are no nets, no ropes, no safety precautions that would pass even the most lenient of modern inspections. The only thing between you and the hard, unforgiving ground is your sense of balance and a silent, desperate prayer to a God you are, ironically, building a house for. You watch as a man named Will, his face etched with the casual fatigue of someone who lives their life on a ledge, reaches for a misplaced tool. His foot slips. It is not a dramatic, flailing event. It is a small, quiet, almost insignificant mistake. For a fraction of a second, he is suspended in the air, his eyes wide, with a surprise that has not yet had time to become terror. The other workers freeze, their hammers stilled in mid-swing. The only sound is the rush of air and a single choked cry that is swallowed by the vastness of the space below. The final sound, a wet, definitive thud, echoes up from the courtyard. It is a sound that ends a life, a family line, a world. For a moment, there is a sacred silence. Then, a foreman shouts, an angry, impatient sound. A man makes the sign of the cross. And then, the rhythmic tapping of the hammers begins again. A life has been lost, but the spire is 2 hours behind schedule. The dangers are not all so vertical. Down on the ground, a team of men, their bodies slick with sweat despite the cold, is wrestling a massive block of limestone into place. They are using a crude wooden crane, a contraption of levers and pulleys, powered by a half-dozen men walking in a giant, hamster wheel-like structure. The ropes are thick hemp, but they are frayed and worn, dark with grime and moisture. You can see the individual fibers straining, groaning, under a weight they were never meant to bear. The men below the suspended stone work quickly, their faces turned upward, a mixture of concentration and a deep, baked-in fatalism in their eyes. There is a sound, not a loud snap, but a low, tearing groan. The kind of sound that precedes a catastrophe. The men in the wheel cry out, but it is too late. The rope gives way, and a ton of history, geology, and human ambition plummets the last 10 feet, landing with a ground-shaking crash that is both a sound and a feeling. Where 2 men stood a moment before, there is now only a cloud of white dust and a dark, spreading stain. The cost of a new rope was a handful of silver. The cost of the men was nothing at all. Let us move now to a place where the danger is not of falling but of fire. You are inside a glassblower's workshop, a place that feels like a gateway to the underworld. The heat from the furnace, the glory hole, is a physical blow, a wave that scorches your eyebrows and dries the moisture from your throat. The air is filled with the roar of the fire and the sharp chemical smell of cooling glass. A master craftsman, his face perpetually flushed, dances a delicate ballet with a glob of molten glass on the end of his blowpipe. It glows with an internal orange-white light, a captured sun that he shapes with his breath and a few simple tools. It is a mesmerizing act of creation. But the liquid glass is over 2,000 degrees. A single misjudged movement, a moment of distraction, and the dance becomes a nightmare. A young apprentice, reaching for a tool, stumbles. His arm brushes against a piece of just-finished, still-glowing glass. His scream is thin and high-pitched, instantly lost in the furnace's roar. The smell of burning cloth and cooking flesh fills the small workshop. His career and the use of his arm are over. He has been branded not by a king's law, but by the unforgiving physics of his trade. These immediate, violent dangers are, in a way, honest. The frayed rope, the slippery plank, the glowing glass. They do not hide their lethality. But now, let us turn to the more insidious threats, the ones you invite into your own home, the ones you place on your own dinner table. We return to the smell of baking bread. But this is not the honest baker we met before. This is a man whose primary ingredient is not flour, but deception. You watch as he mixes his dough, but into the flour he adds a generous scoop of white chalk dust, or perhaps some finely ground plaster of Paris. It makes the flour go further, and it gives the finished loaf a brilliant, fashionable whiteness that his customers crave, associating it with purity. The bread is heavier, denser, and utterly devoid of nutrition. Your teeth grind on unexpected grit. Your stomach aches. The city's children grow weak and bow-legged, their bones soft from a diet of what is essentially edible stone. It is a slow, quiet poisoning, a murder committed one slice at a time and praised for its beautiful color. This culinary alchemy is not limited to bread. The milk delivered to your door is a pale, bluish liquid, thinned with water from a questionable well, and then whitened again with chalk, or, if the dairyman is feeling creative, a slurry of sheep's brains to simulate the texture of cream. The beer, the city's great social lubricant, is a chemical cocktail. To save money on expensive hops, the brewer might add wormwood or gorse to create bitterness, and to give it a frothy head, he adds iron sulfate, a substance more commonly used for tanning leather. This leads us to a particularly absurd and tragic historical event, the Great London Beer Flood of 1814. A massive vat at a brewery burst, unleashing a literal tidal wave of over 300,000 gallons of dark porter. It smashed through buildings, flooded cellars, and drowned 8 people in a sticky, alcoholic deluge. It was a death so bizarre it sounds like a joke, a final, ironic testament to the dangers of the city's favorite drink. The butcher's stall is a landscape of similar deceptions. That joint of beef, a little too bright a red for its age, has been washed with borax or saltpeter to mask the green tinge of decay and kill the smell of putrefaction. The sausages, a mystery in the best of times, are a convenient way to use up the parts of the animal that are not just undesirable, but actively rotting, their flavor saved by a heavy-handed application of pepper and sage. Every meal is a gamble. Every bite is an act of faith in a system with absolutely no regulation beyond the buyer's own wary senses. The wealthy can afford to be cautious, to have their food tasted. But for you, for the common person, the greatest risk you take all day is not crossing a muddy street or working on a high scaffold. It is simply sitting down to eat your supper. And what happens when this diet of plaster and poison inevitably makes you sick? You do not turn to a world of science and reason. You turn to a world where the cure is often more terrifying than the disease. You enter an apothecary's shop, a place that smells of dried herbs, strange chemicals, and dust. The shelves are lined with jars containing things that would make a modern pharmacist faint. Dried toads, powdered woodlice, human skull fragments, and clumps of moss scraped from a dead man's grave. Your physician, a solemn man who smells of wine and self-importance, will diagnose your ailment based on the alignment of the planets and the color of your urine. The cure for your fever is not rest and water. It is to be bled with leeches until you are pale and weak, the belief being that the sickness is an excess of bad blood that must be let out. The logic of these cures is a strange, poetic tapestry of superstition and desperation. You might be prescribed a dose of mummia, which is, quite literally, powdered bits of ancient Egyptian mummies, ground up and sold as a cure for everything from headaches to impotence. The trade in stolen mummies was a roaring business, a ghoulish enterprise fueled by the belief that the preserved essence of a long-dead pharaoh held miraculous healing powers. Or perhaps you would rely on the doctrine of signatures, a belief that God had marked plants to show their purpose. A plant with a heart-shaped leaf must be good for the heart. A walnut, with its brain-like shape, was obviously a cure for madness. It was a beautiful, elegant system for understanding the world. Its only flaw was that it was completely, and often lethally, wrong. And for the most stubborn of afflictions, there was the ultimate remedy, a fusion of royal power and a divine magic, the king's touch. For centuries it was believed that the monarch could cure scrofula, a form of tuberculosis that caused grotesque swellings in the neck, simply by touching the afflicted person. Thousands of desperate sick people would line up for a chance to be touched by the king, a living symbol of God's grace on earth. You can see the irony. The same king who is terrified of spilled salt and the alignment of his own bed is paraded out as a conduit of divine healing, his touch a miracle cure. He dispenses a cure for the body, while his own mind is held captive by the unwritten laws of fear. In a world where your bread is made of stone and your beer can drown you in the street, perhaps believing that a king's finger can knit your flesh back together is not madness. It is merely the last, desperate hope available. But the body, unlike the mind, cannot be fooled by superstition for long. It keeps its own grim ledger. The chalk in the bread, the iron sulfate in the beer, the lingering taint on the butcher's meat. These are debts that will be paid. And the collection begins not with a knock on the door, but with a quiet, internal rebellion. It starts as a subtle unease, a knot of warmth deep in your belly that you try to ignore. But it grows, tightening its grip, twisting your insides into a hot, cramping fist. A wave of nausea washes over you, and the world tilts, the floor seeming to rush up to meet you. You are a vessel for a mutiny, your own body turning against you with a violent efficiency that no king's torturer could ever hope to match. The fever comes next, a dry baking heat that starts behind your eyes and spreads through your limbs, making your own skin feel like a foreign country. The world outside your sickbed dissolves into a blurry, muffled dream, while the world inside you becomes a battlefield of fire and water. This is the common, democratic misery of a bad meal. But there are worse things lurking in the shared air, in the water of the communal well, in a casual touch from a stranger. There is the consumption, a disease with a poet's soul and a killer's patience. It does not rage. It insinuates. It begins as a delicate cough, almost elegant, a faint punctuation mark in your day. You find yourself growing tired, but it is a romantic, languid weariness. Your skin takes on a pale, translucent quality that some might even find beautiful, your eyes seeming larger, brighter, burning with the low, steady flame of the fever. The disease is consuming you from within, slowly turning your lungs into a fragile, bloody lace. But it does so with a terrible, artistic grace. You are a candle being burned from both ends, and for a time, the light you give off is brilliant, a final feverish burst of life before the darkness claims the wick entirely. The cough deepens, and one day you taste the metallic shock of blood on your tongue. The beautiful tragedy has entered its final act. Then there is the jail fever, the typhus, born of filth and despair. It does not bother with poetry. It is a brute, a thug that kicks in the door of your health and ransacks the place. One day you are fine, the next you are felled by a headache that feels like an iron band tightening around your skull. The fever is a roaring furnace, and with it comes a thirst that can never be quenched. The world dissolves into a nightmare landscape. You lie on your pallet, chattering to ghosts that crawl on the ceiling, arguing with shadows in the corner of the room. A dark, mottled rash blooms across your skin, a sign that the body's final defenses are failing. You are no longer in your own bed. You are lost at sea, or trapped in a burning building, or speaking to a long-dead relative. Your mind a shattered mirror, reflecting 1,000 horrors. For those watching, it is a terrifying spectacle, seeing the person they know vanish, replaced by a raving, wild-eyed stranger, their body a mere vessel for a fever dream. And then there is the speckled monster, the great beast of smallpox, a disease so feared its name is often only whispered. It begins innocently enough, with the aches and fever of a common ague. You feel miserable, but it is a familiar misery. And then, after a few days, the first spots appear. They are small, red marks on your face and hands, and with them comes a sliver of hope that it is merely a harmless rash. But the hope is a lie. The spots multiply, spreading across your body like seeds thrown on fertile ground. They rise, filling with fluid, becoming hard, round pustules, each one a tiny, perfect dome of agony. Your entire body becomes a landscape of these sores, your face an unrecognizable mask. The itching is a torment sent from the deepest hell, a fire under the skin that drives you to the brink of madness. The smell, a sweet, sickly stench of infection and decay, fills the room and clings to everything. If you survive, you will not be the same. You will be a new person, remade by the monster, your face a pitted, cratered map of the battle you have just endured, a permanent testament to your ordeal. When the body's betrayal becomes too much to bear alone, you are taken to a place that is not a home for the sick, but a warehouse for the dying. You are carried into St. Giles Hospital, and the first thing that greets you is the smell. It is a thick, complex, and ancient odor, a physical presence in the air. It is the sour stench of unwashed bodies, the sharp, metallic tang of blood, the cloying sweetness of infected wounds, and the faint, fecal undertone of overflowing chamber pots, all layered over the base notes of damp stone and boiled cabbage. It is the smell of concentrated human misery, and it coats the back of your throat, a taste you will never forget. The sound is a constant, low symphony of suffering, a chorus of wet, ragged coughs, the groans of men in pain, the delirious muttering of a woman in the grip of fever, and the quiet, rhythmic sobbing of someone who has lost all hope. This is the sound of the body in its final argument with the soul. The day begins before dawn, not with a gentle awakening, but with a jolt. A lay sister, her face a mask of weary resignation, moves through the long, cavernous ward, shaking you awake. The light is gray and thin, filtering through high, grimy windows, barely illuminating the scene before you. You are in a vast hall lined with dozens of low, wooden beds, crammed so closely together you could reach out and touch the person next to you. And in many cases, you are already touching them, because you are not alone in your bed. You share your narrow straw mattress and single coarse blanket with at least one other person, a stranger whose feverish heat or chilling cold becomes your own. Privacy is a luxury more valuable than gold, and one that does not exist here. The stone floor is cold and damp under your bare feet as you are herded out of bed, a flock of the ailing and the broken. Breakfast is a ritual of profound disappointment. You are handed a wooden bowl containing a thin, grayish gruel. It is little more than watery oats, with no salt, no sugar, no milk. It is warm, and that is its only virtue. You eat it slowly, mechanically, your spoon scraping against the rough wood of the bowl. Around you, others do the same. Some are too weak to lift their own spoons and are fed by the sisters with an air of brisk impatience. A man a few beds down refuses to eat, turning his head away. No one tries to persuade him. His bowl is simply taken away. Everyone here understands that the line between struggling to live and choosing to die is a thin one, and it is crossed with a quiet, personal dignity that is the only kind left to you. The watery gruel does little to fill your stomach, but it marks the official beginning of another day spent waiting. The physician arrives mid-morning. He is not here to heal you. He is here to observe the progress of your decay. He is a man of some standing, dressed in dark, sober clothes that are meant to convey a wisdom he does not possess. He sweeps through the ward like a visiting dignitary, a small cluster of apprentices trailing in his wake, scribbling notes on wax tablets. He does not touch you. He stands at the foot of your bed, his nose wrinkled against the smell, and listens as a sister recites your symptoms. He might ask to see your tongue, or glance at the contents of your chamber pot, a practice he considers the height of diagnostic science. His pronouncements are delivered in a Latin you cannot understand, but his tone is one of absolute certainty. He is a general reviewing his troops, and he seems to regard the high number of casualties as a professional inevitability rather than a personal failure. And then comes the treatment, an experience that often feels indistinguishable from the disease itself. If your diagnosis is an excess of blood, as most diagnoses are, the cure is bloodletting. A barber surgeon, a man who is more butcher than doctor, arrives with his basin and his blades. He is not a gentle man. He ties a strip of leather tightly around your arm, his rough hands finding the vein with practiced indifference. The sting of the lancet is sharp and quick. Your blood, dark and thick, pours into the brass basin. You watch it, feeling a strange sense of detachment as your own life force drains away. The room begins to spin, your vision darkening at the edges. The theory is that the sickness is being drained out with the blood, but the reality is that you are simply being weakened, your body's own meager defenses systematically dismantled in the name of a cure. You are left pale, dizzy, and trembling, but the physician nods with satisfaction. The treatment is a success. For those with ailments of the skin or wounds that will not heal, there are the poultices and salves. A sister arrives with a wooden bowl filled with a foul-smelling greenish paste. The ingredients are a closely guarded secret, a recipe of herbs, animal dung, and cobwebs, all mixed together with lard. She slathers this concoction onto your afflicted area with a wooden spatula. The cold shock of it makes you flinch, and the smell is enough to make your eyes water. You are then bound up in strips of dirty linen. The belief is that the poultice will draw out the poison, the pus, the very essence of the sickness. In reality, it is a perfect breeding ground for infection, a warm, moist, and nutrient-rich environment for every kind of bacteria to thrive. Your small wound, which might have healed on its own, now has the potential to become a raging, gangrenous horror. Midday brings the main meal, a slight improvement on breakfast. It is a thin vegetable soup, mostly watery broth, with a few sad-looking pieces of turnip and carrot floating in it. On a good day, there might be a scrap of fatty meat or a bone for flavor. It is served with a chunk of hard, dark bread. You chew the bread slowly, softening it in the soup, making it last as long as possible. This meal is the central event of the day, a brief respite from the monotony of lying in bed. The sounds in the ward change from moans of pain to the slurping of soup and the scraping of spoons. For a few minutes, you are all engaged in the same simple, life-affirming act of eating, a temporary truce in your individual wars against your own bodies. The afternoon is the longest part of the day. There are no more treatments, no more meals, there is only the waiting. The light shifts in the ward, the sun moving across the sky, casting long, distorted shadows through the grimy windows. You can hear the sounds of the city outside, the rumble of a cart, the shout of a street vendor, the cry of a child. These sounds of normal life seem to be coming from another world, a world you no longer belong to. You lie on your straw mattress, the material rustling with every small movement, and you listen to the symphony of sickness around you. You learn to distinguish the different coughs, the dry, hacking cough of the man with lung fever, the deep, wet, rattling cough of the old man with consumption. You become a connoisseur of human suffering. Sometimes, the monotony is broken by the arrival of a new patient. Two burly attendants carry in a man on a stretcher. He is burning with fever, his eyes wide and unseeing. his lips cracked and dry. He is placed in a recently vacated spot in a shared bed, his body pushed up against a man who is shivering with chills. The diseases are not segregated here. The fever is put next to the flux, the consumption next to the pox. The hospital is a great melting pot of pathogens, a place where you might arrive with one ailment and leave with 3 others, if you leave at all. The new arrival begins to moan, a fresh voice in the choir of the damned, and the rhythm of the ward absorbs him as if he has always been there. And just as new patients arrive, others depart. This is done with a quiet, practiced efficiency that is deeply unsettling. A sister will notice that the man in the bed next to you has stopped breathing. There is no alarm, no ceremony. She simply pulls the thin blanket over his face. He lies there for a while, a still, lumpy shape under the wool, until 2 attendants arrive with a long, wooden board. They roll the body onto it as casually as if they were handling a sack of flour and carry it away. The bed is not empty for long. The straw mattress is turned over, not replaced, and within the hour, a new patient will be lying in the same spot, unaware of the man who died there just a short time before. The turnover is constant. The hospital does not fight death, it processes it. As evening approaches, the shadows in the ward deepen, turning the vast room into a landscape of indistinct shapes and imagined threats. The sisters move through the rows of beds, lighting a few tallow candles and oil lamps. The light is weak and flickering, casting more shadows than it dispels. It makes the faces of the sick seem gaunt and skeletal, their eyes dark hollows. The fear in the room grows with the darkness. Night is when the fevers spike, when the breathing becomes more difficult, when the body's defenses are at their lowest. Night is when the dying is done. A quiet, palpable anxiety settles over the ward, a collective holding of breath as the world outside goes dark. Supper is a repeat of breakfast, another bowl of thin gray gruel. It is eaten in near silence, the flickering light making the whole scene resemble a gathering of ghosts. After the bowls are collected, it is time for prayers. A priest walks to the center of the ward, his voice a low drone as he recites the evening rites in Latin. Most of the patients do not understand the words, but the sound is meant to be comforting, a reminder that God is watching over them. But for many, it feels like the last rites are being administered to the entire ward at once. It is an acknowledgement that for many here, prayer is the only medicine left, and their faith is the only thing standing between them and the terror of the approaching night. And then the lights are extinguished. There is only the deep, oppressive darkness, punctuated by a single candle left burning at the far end of the ward, a tiny beacon in an ocean of black. The sounds of the night are different from the sounds of the day. The coughs and groans seem louder, more desperate in the silence. You can hear the frantic, scratching sound of rats scurrying across the stone floor. You can hear the man in the bed next to you whispering to himself, his mind lost in a fever dream. You lie perfectly still, your eyes wide open, staring up into a darkness that feels solid, as if you could reach out and touch it. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside, becomes a portent of doom. Sleep, when it comes, is not a gentle release. It is a shallow, troubled state, filled with nightmares that are often indistinguishable from the reality of the ward. You dream of falling, of drowning, of being buried alive. You wake up with a start, your heart pounding, the thin blanket soaked with a cold sweat. You are never truly alone with your thoughts. The suffering of others is a constant presence. You hear a man begin to choke, a horrifying, gurgling sound that goes on for what feels like an eternity before falling silent. You hear a woman begin to weep, a sound of such profound, hopeless grief that it feels like a physical blow. You lie there, a helpless witness, and you pray. You pray for the morning. You pray for an end to the noise, and sometimes you pray for the same silence that has just fallen over the man who is choking. In the deepest hour of the night, you see a faint light moving through the darkness. It is a sister making her rounds with a single shielded candle. She moves silently, a ghost in the gloom. She stops at a bed, leans over, and then makes the sign of the cross. She gently closes the eyes of the person lying there, pulls the blanket over their face, and moves on. She is the angel of death, her duties simple and final. She is not here to offer comfort or to save lives. She is here to tidy up, to make sure the dead do not disturb the living. Watching her silent progress through the ward is to understand the fundamental truth of this place. It is not a place of healing. It is a machine for dying, and you are just another cog, slowly, inexorably, moving toward the final, silent gear. If you are fortunate enough to avoid the hospital, you might turn to a curandero, a cunning man or woman who operates outside the world of physicians and Latin texts. You find them not in a grand stone building, but in a small, cluttered cottage on the edge of town, the air thick with the smell of drying herbs, wood smoke, and something else, something wild and earthy. The healer does not look at your urine or consult the stars. They look into your eyes. They listen, not just to your words, but to the fear behind them. Their medicine is a brew of ancient knowledge and powerful superstition. They might give you a tea made from willow bark for your fever, a genuine source of what will one day be aspirin, but they will also insist you drink it only when the moon is waning. They will bind your wound with a clean moss dressing, a surprisingly effective antiseptic, but they will also mutter a charm over it to ward off elvish arrows, which they believe to be the true source of the infection. Their world is one where a poultice and a prayer hold equal weight, where every sickness is a physical ailment and a spiritual curse, and both must be treated for the cure to hold. And for the most perilous journey of all, the journey into life, there is the midwife. She is not a doctor, but a figure of immense power and knowledge, a priestess of the birthing bed. She arrives with a bag of linens, herbs, and a collection of well-worn superstitions. She knows, from 100 births, how to turn a breech baby, how to handle a knotted cord, how to soothe a laboring mother with a steady hand and a calming voice. But she also knows that all doors and windows must be unlocked, all knots in the house untied, to ensure an easy passage for the child's soul into the world. She will not allow a cross-eyed person to enter the room for fear they will cast a curse on the newborn. Childbirth is a battle, fought not just against the body, but against a host of unseen, malicious forces that prey on new life. The midwife is a warrior, fighting on both fronts, her practical skill and her deep-seated fear of the unseen world inextricably intertwined. But for so many, all these paths, the hospital, the healer, the midwife, lead to the same destination. You find yourself standing at the edge of the city's cemetery. It is not a peaceful, manicured park. It is a chaotic, lumpy field, overcrowded and perpetually hungry for more residents. The ground is uneven, a testament to the countless shallow graves that have been dug, filled, and then collapsed over time. Old, weathered headstones lean at drunken angles, their inscriptions worn away by wind and rain. The air here feels heavy, still, and cold, even on a warm day. It smells of damp earth, decaying flowers, and the faint, unsettlingly sweet odor of corruption that seems to rise from the soil itself. A new grave has been dug, a raw, rectangular wound in the earth. The gravediggers, leaning on their spades, share a flask of cheap gin, their faces impassive. They are the city's final bureaucrats, processing the last of its paperwork. You watch as a small funeral procession arrives. There is no hearse, only a simple, unadorned pine box carried on the shoulders of 4 men. The family follows, their grief a raw, silent thing. The priest recites the rites quickly, his words seeming thin and inadequate in the face of such a vast, final silence. The coffin is lowered into the ground with a rough scrape of wood against earth. The first shovelful of dirt lands on the lid with a hollow, definitive thud that seems to echo in your own chest. This is the final sound, the punctuation mark at the end of a life. The grave will be filled in quickly, a small wooden cross pounded into the loose earth, and then the family will leave. They will not linger. The cemetery is not a place for quiet reflection. It is a place of profound and terrifying taboo. It is the borderland between the living and the dead, a place whose laws are the oldest and most powerful of all. You do not whistle here, you do not point at a grave, and you make sure to leave before the sun sets, lest the residents become restless, and you find yourself in a conversation you are not prepared to have. But these individual rituals, these private negotiations with fear, are merely single threads in a vast, complex, and suffocating tapestry of social belief that binds everyone together, from the lowest beggar to the king himself. Let us now step into the chaotic, vibrant, and deeply perilous world of public life, where your every action is judged not by a magistrate, but by the thousand-eyed god of public opinion and ancient custom. You are standing in a narrow street, pressed into a doorway to make way for a wedding procession. The air is thick with the scent of crushed herbs underfoot, rosemary for remembrance, lavender for luck, and the nervous sweat of the crowd. The bride is a vision in her finest wool dress, her face hidden behind a thick veil, not for modesty, but to shield her from the jealous glances of the fae, and the blighting power of the evil eye. Her father leads her, his face a grim mask of concentration, for if she stumbles on the way to the church, it is an omen so catastrophic the wedding might be called off entirely. A crow flies overhead, and a collective gasp ripples through the onlookers. Is it flying to the left or the right? Does it call out once or 3 times? The answer to these questions is more important to the future happiness of the couple than any dowry or blessing the priest can offer. The solemnity of the church gives way to the licensed chaos of the wedding feast, held in the main room of a sprawling tavern. The noise is a physical force, a wall of sound made of a scraping fiddle, the rhythmic stomp of dancing feet on the wooden floor, and the booming laughter of men deep into their cups. The air is so thick, with the smell of roast pig, spilled ale, and human sweat, that you can almost taste it. You are squeezed onto a long bench, your shoulder pressed against a stranger's, your knees knocking against the rough-hewn table. The bride and groom sit at the head, their faces flushed, sharing a single trencher of bread and drinking from the same cup in a ritual far older than the church service they just endured. Every moment is a performance, scrutinized by the entire community. A spilled cup of wine is not a clumsy accident. It is a sign of future tears. The first to fall asleep at the table will be the first to die. Even the giving of gifts is a minefield of taboo. A knife is a terrible present, for it signifies the cutting of the bond of friendship, and must always be sold for a single tiny coin to negate the curse. Now, let us turn from the celebration of a new union to the grim necessities that attend the end of one. You are in a small, crowded room, the air heavy and still, thick with the smell of death barely masked by cloying herbs. This is a like-wake, the vigil kept over a body before burial. In the center of the room, on a simple wooden plank, lies the corpse of a man you knew. His eyes have been closed with copper coins, payment for the ferryman who will guide his soul across the river of darkness. A plate of salt rests on his chest, a heavy, crystalline anchor to keep his body in the grave and prevent evil spirits from entering the vacant vessel. All the mirrors in the house have been covered with black cloth, lest the soul of the deceased be trapped in the reflection, or worse, that the reflection of a living person be captured, marking them as the next to die. You and the other mourners will sit here all night, without sleeping, telling stories, drinking ale, and most importantly, watching. You are not just paying your respects. You are standing guard, ensuring that the dead man does not rise, that his spirit departs peacefully, and does not linger, hungry for the warmth of the life it has lost. The oppressive gloom of the wake is shattered by the riotous explosion of a Saints' Day festival. The entire city seems to have poured into the main square, a churning, shouting, laughing sea of humanity. Piety and debauchery are locked in a drunken embrace. A solemn procession of priests, chanting in Latin and swinging censers that pour sweet smoke into the foul air, is followed by a troupe of performers with painted faces and a dancing bear. Men on stilts stride through the crowd, while others, wearing grotesque masks with the horns of a goat or the snout of a pig, chase screaming girls through the alleys, their identities lost in the licensed anarchy of the day. You see a man selling flimsy, ink-smudged pamphlets, fresh from a printing press. You buy one for a penny. It is not news. It is a prophecy, a true and horrifying account of the monstrous pig born with the face of a man, its woodcut illustration, a terrifying, blotchy nightmare. This is not entertainment. It is a divine message, a warning printed on cheap paper, and its story will spread through the city faster than any plague, becoming a new and terrible truth that must be accounted for. The next morning, the festival's debris, scraps of food, discarded ribbons, and the occasional puddle of sick is a testament to the night's revelry, but the true hangover is one of fear. You are at the fish market, where the smell of the sea battles the stench of the nearby gutter, and you can hear the story of the man-faced pig being discussed with the same seriousness as the price of herring. The story has already grown. Now the pig spoke, uttering a prophecy of a coming famine. The fishwife, her hands covered in scales, tells of a friend of her cousin who saw it with her own eyes. An old man spits on the ground for luck and declares that it is a sign that a great man will soon fall. The pamphlet's crude fiction has become an undeniable fact, a new piece of the unwritten legal code. It will influence decisions for weeks to come. Farmers will plant different crops, merchants will hoard grain, and young women will check their own newborn infants with a new and specific terror in their hearts. All because of a story about a pig, printed on a scrap of paper, and baptized in the fever of the crowd. We end, as so many days do, back in the tavern. The smoke is thick, the ale is flowing, and the conversations are the loom upon which the social fabric is woven and repaired. Here the unwritten laws are debated, ratified, and passed into legend. A group of carters in the corner argues not about road tolls, but about the proper way to appease the spirit of a black dog that haunts a particular crossroads. A young man is trying to sell a horse, but no one will buy it, because a rumor has started that the horse was born with its teeth already grown, a sure sign that it is an agent of the devil. The story of the man-faced pig is now told as if it happened just down the road, and a new detail has been added. The pig's owner has been struck blind. This is the true seat of power, the real parliament of the people. The king's laws are obeyed out of fear of the gallows, but these laws, the laws of the crossroads, of the evil eye, of the prophetic pig, are obeyed because to break them is to risk something far worse. The ruin of your soul, the cursing of your children, and the cold, terrifying chaos of a world without meaning. But even a world built on fear cannot stand still forever. Like a great, slow glacier, the collective will of humanity begins to grind forward, imperceptibly at first, and then with a force that can carve new valleys into the landscape of belief. The change does not come from the king's chamber, not at first. It rises from the mud of the streets, from the whispered complaints in the smoky taverns, from the sheer bloody-minded exhaustion of living in a world where every shadow holds a threat and every meal is a gamble. It is the slow, dawning realization that while the wrath of unseen spirits is a terrible thing to contemplate, the immediate, tangible misery of plague, poison, and poverty is a far more relentless killer. The unwritten laws of fear begin to face a new and powerful rival, the written laws of survival. This new kind of law begins with the most basic of human needs. After another wave of the sweating sickness scythes through the city, leaving a trail of hollowed-out families and overflowing graveyards, a new kind of council is formed. They are not priests or mystics. They are merchants and clerks, men who think in ledgers and columns, who understand that dead customers cannot buy goods. They pass a decree, a simple, almost laughable one by modern standards, that household waste can no longer be thrown into the central gutters. It must be collected in piles at the end of the street. The outrage is immediate. It is an affront to tradition, an inconvenience. But then, slowly, the street begins to smell a little less like an open sewer. The flies begin to thin. If today you can turn a tap and drink a glass of water without fearing for your life, you owe a silent debt to these first, reluctant pioneers of public health, who fought a war not with swords, but with brooms and regulations, against an enemy of filth that had ruled for 1,000 years. The war then moves to the dinner table. The whispers about the baker who uses plaster to whiten his bread, or the butcher whose sausages contain more sawdust than pork, finally coalesce into a public fury that cannot be ignored. The first inspectors are appointed, men with the authority to storm into a bakery and test a loaf, to confiscate a barrel of ale that tastes more of chemicals than barley. The punishments are not fines paid in secret. They are brutal public spectacles. A fraudulent baker is dragged through the streets on a wooden sledge with his chalky, inedible loaf tied around his neck, a target for the rotten vegetables and righteous anger of the very people he poisoned. If today you can buy a loaf of bread, confident that it is simply bread, that it will nourish you and not sicken you, it is because of the public humiliation of men like these. That small, unassuming list of ingredients on the side of your food packaging is a peace treaty, signed in the ink of 1,000 such regulations, a guarantee won by generations who knew the taste of betrayal in their daily meal. And what of the children? What of Pip, the small boy swallowed by the chimney, or Ilara, the girl tethered to the deafening loom? The change for them is the slowest of all, for their misery is the very fuel of the kingdom's progress. But the stories of boys trapped in the suffocating darkness, of girls scalped by unguarded machines, begin to accumulate, forming a weight on the public conscience that even the most hardened industrialist cannot ignore. The first laws are timid, pathetic even. A rule that a child under 9 cannot be sent up a chimney, a suggestion that a 12-hour workday might be sufficient for a girl of 15. These laws are mocked, ignored, and fought with a furious passion by those who profit from the cheapness of a child's life. But the idea, once planted, begins to grow. The radical notion that a human being is not a component, not a tool to be used up and discarded, begins its long, slow, and bloody march into the modern age. Every safety railing, every fire escape, every 8-hour day is a silent monument to the children whose lives were the price of that enlightenment. And so, the world begins to be measured, mapped, and explained. The man-faced pig, which once would have sent a wave of terror through the kingdom, is now an object of curiosity. A man with a notebook and a keen eye, a natural philosopher, arrives to see it. He does not see a divine omen. He sees a congenital defect. He writes not a prophecy, but a description. The comet that streaks across the night sky is no longer a harbinger of a king's death, but a celestial body, its path predictable, its composition knowable. The fear does not vanish, not completely, but it is pushed back. It retreats from the public square and into the private shadows of the mind. The unwritten laws of taboo are replaced by the written laws of physics, of biology, of chemistry. The world, it seems, is no longer haunted. It is simply governed by a different, more complex, and far less personal set of rules. The ghost in the crossroads is replaced by the new danger of a runaway carriage on a crowded street. But the echoes remain. They are quieter now, softened by centuries of science and security, but they are there. The king's terror of spilling salt has become your own faint, irrational impulse to knock on wood. The midwife's fear of an unlocked door trapping a soul has become the faint superstition of not walking under a ladder. The like wake's vigil to keep the dead from rising has become the ghost stories we tell around a campfire, a safe and thrilling echo of a fear that was once a palpable, nightly reality. The ancient laws have not been erased. They have been absorbed into our culture, into our language, into the marrow of our modern bones. We are their descendants, living in a world they built, but we still carry the faint, genetic memory of the darkness they inhabited, the primal fears that shaped them, and by extension, shaped us. And now, here you are, lying in a quiet room, in a comfortable bed. The air you breathe is clean. The water in your pipes is safe. The bread in your kitchen is not made of stone. The silence of the night is not a time of threat, but a time of peace. This quiet, this safety, this simple, unremarkable peace is the true legacy of all the souls we have visited tonight. It is the inheritance bought by the miner's black lungs, the weaver's tired fingers, the fisherman's chapped hands, and the patient's feverish suffering. They endured a world governed by fear, so that you could live in one governed by reason. Let the weight of their world drift away now. Feel the comfort of your own. The ancient echoes are fading, becoming distant, a soft and gentle hum on the very edge of your hearing. Let these whispers of the past become the soft, rolling landscape of your own quiet rest as you drift, peacefully and deeply, into sleep.